Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. So in this video, I will be discussing about A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, summary and analysis of part 2, that is caves. So let's start. So in chapter 12, this chapter is devoted solely to a description of Marabar caves. Each of the caves include a tunnel about 8 feet long, 5 feet high, 3 feet wide that leads to a circular chamber about 20 feet in diameter. Having seen one cave, one has essentially seen all of them. A visitor who sees them return to Chandrapur uncertain whether he has had an interesting experience, a dull one, or even an experience of all. So in the next chapter, that is chapter 13, Adela Quested mentions the trip to the Marabar caves to Miss Derrick, but she mentions that she is unsure whether the trip will occur because Indians seem forgetful. A servant overhears them and passes on the information to Mahmud Ali. Aziz therefore decides to push the matter through securing Fielding and Godbole for the trip and asking Fielding to approach Miss Quested and Mrs. Moore. Aziz considers all aspects of the trip, including food and alcohol, and worries about the cultural differences. In chapter 14, this chapter basically establishes more about for the past 2 weeks in which they had been in India, Mrs. Moore and Mrs. Quested had felt nothing, living inside cocoons. Mrs. Moore accepts her apathy, but Adela resents her. It is Adela's faith that the whole stream of event is important and interesting, and if she grows bored, she blames herself severely. This is her only major insecurity or insincerity. In chapter 15, Adela and Aziz, a guide, continue along the tedious expedition. They encounter several isolated caves which the guide persuades them to visit, but there is really nothing for them to see. Aziz has little to say to Mrs. Quested, for he likes her less than he does Mrs. Moore and greatly dislike that she is marrying a British official, while Adela has little to say to Aziz. In chapter 16, Aziz waits in the cave smoking, and when he returns, he finds the guide alone with his head on one side. The guide does not exactly know which cave Mrs. Quested entered, and Aziz worries that she is lost. On his way down the path to the car that had arrived from Chandrapur, Aziz finds Miss Quested field glasses lying at the verge of a cave and put them in his pocket. In chapter 17, Fielding speaks to Collector, who tells him that Miss Quested had been insulted in one of the Marabar caves and that he would not allow Fielding to accompany Aziz to preserve him from scandal. Fielding thinks that Adela is mad, a remark that Mr. Turton demands that he withdraw. Fielding explains he cannot believe that Aziz is guilty. In chapter 18, Miss Macbeth, the district superintendent of police, is the most reflective and most educated of Chandrapur officials. He receives Aziz with courtesy but is shocked at his downfall. Mr. Macbeth has a theory about climatic zones. All the fortunate natives are criminals at heart for the simple reason that they live south of latitude 30. In chapter 19, Hamidullah waits outside the superintendent's office. Fielding tells him that the evidence for Aziz's innocence will come. Hamidullah is convinced that Aziz is innocent and throws his lot with the Indian. Realizing the profundity of the gulf that separates them, Hamidullah wants Aziz to have Amrita Rao, a Hindu who is notoriously anti-British, as his lawyer. In chapter 20, Miss Quested plight had brought her great support among the English in India. She came out from her ennobled in sorrow at the meeting at the club. Fielding asked whether there is an official bulletin about Adela's health or whether they gave report are due to gossips. In chapter 21, Fielding spent the rest of the evening with Nawab Bahadur. Hamidullah Mahmood Ali and others of the Confederacy, Fielding has an inclination to tell Professor Godbole of the tactical and moral error he had made in being rude to Ronnie Halsop, but Godbole had already gone to bed. In chapter 22, Adela lays for several days in Mr. Magbridge's bungalow. Others are overkind to her, the men too respectful and women too sympathetic to her. The one visits she wants Mrs. Moore kept away. In chapter 23, Lady Mellanby, wife of the Lieutenant Governor, had been gratified by the appeal addressed to her by the ladies of Chandrapur, but she could do nothing. She does agree to help Mrs. Moore get passage out of the India in her own cabin. In chapter 24, Adela resumes her morning kneel to Christianity, imploring God for a favorable verdict. Adela worries that she will break down during the trial, but collector tells her that she is bound to win, but does not tell her that Nawab Bahadur had financed the defense and would surely appeal. In chapter 25, Misquisted renounces his own people and is drawn into a mass of Indians and carried towards the public exit of the court. Fielding finds her and tells her that she cannot walk alone in Chandrapur, for there will be a riot, and then Aziz is released. In chapter 26, Fielding and Misquisted remains isolated at the college and have the first of several curious conversations. He asks her why she would make a charge if she were to withdraw it, but she cannot give a definitive answer. She tells him that she has been unwell since the cave and perhaps before that, and wonders what gave her the hallucination. He gives 4 explanations but only gives 3. Aziz is guilty, as her friends think. She's invented the charges out of malice, which is what Fielding's friend think, or she had a hallucination. In chapter 27, after the victory banquet, Mr. Zulfikar mentioned Aziz and Fielding discusses the future. Aziz knows that Fielding wants him to not sue Adela, for it will show him to be gentleman, but Aziz says that he has become anti-British and ought to have become so sooner. In chapter 28, the death of Mrs. Moore assumes more subtle and lasting shapes in Chandrapur than in England. A legend sprang up that Ronnie killed her for trying to save Aziz's life, and there was sufficient truth in that legend to trouble authorities. In chapter 29, Sir Gilbert, the Lieutenant Governor of province, visits Chandrapur. Fielding finds himself drawn more and more into Mrs. Quisted's affairs and appreciates her fine loyal character and humility. In chapter 30, Mr. Das visits Aziz. Seeking favor, he asks Aziz to write poetry for the magazine he publishes. Aziz accommodates him, but asks why he should fulfill these when Mr. Das tried to send him to prison. In chapter 31, the sequence of the events had decided Aziz's emotions, and his friendship with Fielding began to cool. He assumes that the rumor about Fielding and Adela is true and resents it. In chapter 32, Fielding leaves India for travel in other exotic parts of the world. Fielding found Egypt charming as well as Crete and Venice. He felt that everything in Venice was right, where everything in India was wrong, such as the idol temple and lumpy hills. Elsewhere there is form that India lacks. So it depends upon time as well. So that's all from my side. If you have any queries, you can ask me in the comment section. Please like, subscribe and share my channel. Thank you for watching.